And now we're on Daf Chaf Dalid Amid Beis, and we're quoting a Beitza. And the Beitza says the following. Min hanigarim biyontif. You're allowed to take animals, behemos, chayos, from bivrim ktanim and shech them on yontif. Why? Because in these bivrim ktanim, they are already considered nitod, they've already been captured on Erev Yontif. So neither problem exists. Neither problem of muktzah because they're already mukhan, and neither problem of tzeder because they're already nitod. Now, why are they called nigarin? He says here in the name of Rashi and others that the word nigarim means talos v'charitzim. In other words, they dug different kinds of channels and furrows in order to bring water to feed the animals that were in the bivrin. So they're called nigrin. The Aruch, on the other hand, says that the word nigrin means malkodos, which means traps. And the animal puts his leg in the trap and he gets trapped. And that's called nigrin, as if to say, brarin. Brarin means they are dragged in, captured. Avolo min harishasos umin ha-michmoros. Okay, we don't know what these are, but they're different types of traps. And if he finds a chaya, and he doesn't know whether or not it was trapped on Erev Yontif, before nightfall, or on Yontif, it's asur. Why? Because safek muchan is asur. And that's avolo. Avolo means it's asur to take from these animals. Rav Shimon Elazar Omer, I can find a simon. In other words, I can look at the trap and I can tell you by looking at the trap whether or not the animal was already captured on Erev Yontif. What's the magic of Rav Shimon Gamliel, Rav Shimon Elazar? Ba umitza'an mikulkalim me Erev Yontif. He doesn't see an animal trapped in the trap, in the Malkodes. But on Erev Yontif already, he sees that the trap is mikulkalim. What does that mean? They used for traps very long nets. And they were a meal, which is the distance that it would take to walk 18 minutes, or chatzi meal, very long. As soon as the animal is captured on one end of the net, and the animal tries to get free, it already starts pulling on the net, on the trap. And that act, the repercussions or the reverberations of that moving around is going to change the whole nature of this trap. And if you look at it, you'll see that there was an animal already trapped in. So even though he didn't find the animal trapped, he can assume that the animal was trapped before Yontif. He writes in the Hebrew, "Im motzei shenitak mimokom shenitka b'kotze echad, simanu sheyesh chaya b'ktzei ha'acher." He knows from one end that there was an animal that was trapped on the other end, and therefore mutar. However, ba'u mitza'an mikulkalim b'yontif, if he didn't check the nets, the traps on Erev Yontif, the only trap checked out the situation on Yontif, so even though he found it mikulkalim, he doesn't know when the animal was trapped. In such a case, then bi'adua shebiyom tov nitzodav asurim. Wait just 1 second. Bo mitzon mikulkalim b'yontif. Oh, I'm sorry. You have to add another point. He knows that these traps were not mekulkalim on Erev Yontif. Therefore, he knows for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, that the animal was trapped on Yontif because the siman of mekulkalim only manifested itself on Yontif itself. Now, the Gemara is going to now apply a methodology which is called diyukim sosrim. What does that mean? If you have a Mishnah or a Beitza that's made up of a Reisha and a Sefer, and the Reisha tells you that it's mutter in this case, the Sefer tells you it's asur in the opposite case. That's called diyukim sosrim, because there's a middle ground between the two extremes. And now we're going to find ourselves in a stira and a contradiction between the Reish and the Sefer. Why? Ha gufa kash. The Gemara points out that this Beitza, this recorded Beitza, has an inner contradiction. Why? Because Reb Shimon ben Elazar, on the one hand, Amrit Bo Mitzad Mekukol Mi Erev Yontif, only if you found the kilkul, the siman, on Erev Yontif, the Yadushim Erev Yontif Nitzodu, and it's mutter because you know that it was trapped on Yontif. On Erev Yontif. Taima, the implication of the Reisha is that the reason why it's mutter is the ba umitzan mekul kalit. He knows for sure that the animal was trapped on Erev Yontif because he found it on Erev Yontif mekul kalit. Sfeika, but let's say he doesn't know one way or the other. Asurim, because in the Reisha, Rav Shimon Gamliel postulates that it's only mutter because you checked it out on Erev Yontif, you found it mekul kalit. Rav Shimon ben Elazar, I meant to say. But Ema Sefer. That's going to contradict the Sefer. Why? Because in the Sefer it says, Ba umitza'an mikul kolim b'yontif. If he finds that it was mekulkal on Yontif, means on Erev Yontif, the net was unaffected. It was in its perfect original state. And he finds that it was shooken up on Yontif, then it's awesome. Implying time of the moment on Mikul Kolen. Hasfeka, Me'erev Yontif, Nitzodu, Mutarit. In a case of Suffolk, we're going to assume that it was captured on Erev Yontif and it's mutter, but we just finished saying from the Reisha that the Reisha was only matir because he checked it out on Erev Yontif and he saw there was Mekulko, implying that if it was a Suffolk, it would be awesome. That's called diyukim sosri. Our answer is Hachikam. This is the way we're going to put together the Beitza of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Ba umitzon mekukal me'erev yontif b'yaduach me'erev yontif nitzodu mutarin pasfeika nase kemisha nitzodu b'yontif asurim. The implication of the Reisha, which would be Isser in this case, is going to be compared to the Sefer. In the Sefer was also because he found that it was mekukal on yontif. In the Reisha, we were matir because he found that it was mekulkal on Erev Yontif. Had he not known for sure that it was mekulkal on Erev Yontif, he would have to assume that it became mekulkal on Yontif itself. V'asurim. So it means that Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, holds Safek Muchan Asur. Rabbi Yehuda Mishmua Alachik Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. That Safek Muchan is Asur. So it's only a case where you know for sure that the animal was captured on Erev Yontif, is it mutter? Now let's address the following question. Why is Safek Muchan Asur? Muktzah is an Isser D'Rabbanan. And our universal principle is that Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula. Why should Muktzah be different than any other Safek D'Rabbanan? Why are we paskening, in this case, like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, that Safek Muchan is awesome? So here we have a principle called Dover Sheyesh Lo Matiri. And I'm going to present it to you in the Lumdische Sprach of the yeshiva world. There's something called Hachroas Sveikos. In a case of something that in any event, if I just wait it out, it's becoming mutter, then there's no need to be machriya the suffix. Don't get involved in a suffix when you'll definitely, if you wait it out, it'll definitely be mutter. So muktzah will be mutter tomorrow, after Shabbos. So why get involved on Shabbos in a suffix iser? It's a davar sheiks amatir. With the passage of time, it will become mutter. Now the Maharsha points out here that Rabbi Yehuda Mishmuel paskins halacha ki Reb Shimon Elazar for two reasons. Number one, he's paskening like Reb Shimon Elazar that suffix muchan is also. It's only if he knows that it was mekulkal on erev yontiv is it mutar, but in suffix it would be also. From that perspective, says the Maharsha, the Chachamim agreed with Reb Shimon Elazar. Why then did Shmuel have to paskin like Reb Shimon Elazar? And the answer is, says the Maharsha, because Reb Shimon Elazar has another chiddush. And what is that? That if he finds it mekulkalim on erev yontiv, then he assumes that the animal was captured on erev yontiv and it's mutter. That's the chiddush of Reb Shimon ben Elazar, because this is karov levada, but it's not vada. And the Tanakam, the Chachamim, never accepted that opinion. They need real vada. This might be karov levada. It inclines you to think and believe that it was captured on erev yontiv, but you don't know so for sure. The Mishnah tells us a story about a guy who brought fish to Rabbi Gamliel on Yontif, and Rabbi Gamliel declared mutarim heim, mutarim lemai. What did Rabbi Gamliel have in mind when he allowed it? There are two dimensions to muktzah. One is tiltul, and the other is achila. And we're much more machmir in achila than we are in tiltul. So Rav Omer mutarim lekabel. You're allowed to be metaltel these fish, because from Gamliel holds that suffix muchan is mutter, but only betiltel. Achila he would not allow. The Levi Omer mutarim b'achila. Even achila is mutter. And how much more so tiltel? That goes without saying. Omar Rav, you know what problem Levi had? Levi was absent and he didn't show up for class, and because of his absence, he made a big mistake. Omar Rav, li'olam al yivna odom atzmo mi beis hamedrash afilu sha'achas. You should never be absent for the Beis HaMedrash. You hear the Shabbos, even an hour. Because during that hour, there might be something very important that's said, and you'll miss it. And you'll walk out without that extra hour with a wrong impression. Both myself, says Rav, and Levi, my colleague, were both studying under the tutelage of Rabbi Yehuda Nossi. And Rabbi Yehuda Nossi made one statement on one day, and he changed his mind and offered a different statement on the other day. Ki amar lo hashmaita, when he got to this sugya, and he was explaining the sheet of Rabbi Gamliel, the arta, in the evening, amar mutarim b'achila. He said in the name of Rabbi Gamliel that if you have a suffix mukan, then it's mutter even to eat it. But Safra, however, the very next morning, he changed his mind. He rescinded his original interpretation. V'yomar, and he stated that mutarim, where Gamliel allowed you in the case of suffix muchan, that's only lekabel, that's only betiltel. But b'achila, it's also. I know the Avi Midrasha. I was there in the Beis Medrash present in the morning, not only the previous evening, and Hadribi. And therefore, based on the fact that Rebbe changed his mind, I changed my mind, and I paskin that Rabbi Gamliel was only matir tiltul but not achila. Levi was absent that morning. And therefore, Levi insisted, as I would have agreed, except for the fact that I was there in the morning, but based on Rebbe's presentation of Rabbi Gamliel at night, that there's a heter straight across the board that includes not only a limited heter for tiltul, but even the expanded heter of achila is lo hadarbe. And Levi never changed his mind about that because he didn't know that his Rebbe, our Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, had changed his mind. And now the Gemara is going to ask a kash on Levi, which really in effect is a kash on Rebbe at night, the original position of Rebbe. Meisvei, we learned in the Beitza, Nochri Shehevi Doron Li Yisrael. So a guy brings a gift to a Jew on Yontif, Ilu Dogim HaMefulamim. Mefulamim means they're still moist. You can see that they were just fished out of the water. Uperos b'nei Yomon, or you can tell from the fruits they're so fresh. It must have been harvested and cut off the tree today. Mutarim. Now, what do you mean mutarim? What happened to muktzah? I mean, the guy fished this out on Yontif. Erev Yontif, it was in the water, so it wasn't muchar, it was muktzah. And the same thing with the peros b'nei Yomon. So therefore, we're going to have to assume by process of elimination that this brisa reflects the shita Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel is the one who's mekil in muktzah. So if there's a kula in muktzah, in the cases of dagim, mefulamim, and peros b'nei Yomon, that even though it's b'nei Yomon, we could still be mekil, then we can only assume that this story and the psak, the ruling of the brisa, reflects the shita Rabbi Gamliel. Bishleim olaman tiyoma. If you are like Rav, that mutarim in our Mishnah, Rabbi Gamliel means mutarim lekabel. You're allowed to receive them, meaning move them around from place to place, take them into your hands, shop here. Now I understand the brisa when it says mutarim in this brisa. It means it's mutar only betiltul, but not ba'achila. And again, even though we don't find that Rabbi Gamliel was matir in a vadai situation, he was only matir in a suffix muchan. But perhaps he was mekil even in the case of a vadai eno muchan. That's a difficult point in the Havam. Elamanti Omar Mutar Bachila Koito Levi, who says Rabbi Gamliel allowed you even Bachila. How could that possibly be? Peros b'nei Yoma mishari b'achila. When you know that these fruits were not prepared on Erev Yontif, which means that certainly they are muchan, they are eno muchan, and they're muktzah, but sure Rabbi Gamliel would not be mater achila. It's a halvatzara. If you hold the Rabbi Gamliel's kula was as far as tiltul, okay, maybe he was mekil and tiltul, even if we know it was a vade eno muchan. But no one would allow you to go as far as say that achila is mutter in a case of a vade eno muchan. So the Gemara now goes back to what I call sane logical thinking. Uletamech, and your understanding of the brisa is that the brisa was matir b'tiltul, and you wanted to bring this as a proof for Rav that Rabbi Gamliel was only matir tiltul but not achila. Is peros b'nei Yoma mishori b'tiltul? Can you tell me that Rabbi Gamliel would have been mekil for tiltul even in a vadai eno muchan? Rabbi Gamliel was saying a suffix muchan is mutter, but not a vadai eno muchan. Hell, and therefore we have to reject this whole brisa. The kavrei dadime ubeperi the kvishi biyarka askinu. Well, I'm sorry, not that we reject the brisa, but we reject the original understanding of the brisa. Maybe I wasn't clear about that. So we're not talking about Dagim and Peros that are Bnei Yoma, but rather there's a certain indication that they are Bnei Yoma. For example, Adimi, we're talking about fish that are still red. In other words, they still have that, if you've ever seen, red in fish, that's indicative of the moistness and the freshness of the fish. Uperi the kvishe biyarka, and we have fruits that were planted, so to speak, replanted. It's after you harvest the fruit, what they used to do in order to keep the fruit moist so it shouldn't dry up, they would actually be toming them. They would hide them or insert them into a yerek, into a vegetable, and that would protect the moisture. Okay, so really what we're saying is there's no proof that it's, so what we're left with is a case where we could see that they're not B'nai Yoma. And that's why the Beitza was matir even b'achila. And that's not a kasha on Levi, because we have proof positive that this is not a ben Yoma. It's not from today. But my karilu b'nei Yoma. But what are we going to do with the Beitza? The language of the Beitza is pretty outspoken. It says b'nei Yoma, and the answer is hein ke'ein b'nei Yoma. They're similar to b'nei Yoma. And the chiddush of the Beitza here is that even though they're similar to Bnei Yoma, we're not worried about Maras Ayin, that somebody would think that we were matir Bnei Yoma, but rather we know and we have proof that these are Einam Bnei Yoma, and therefore they are mutar. So this is where we're going to stop here, Omra Papa, and in Mirz Hashem, the next shir I'll record and put up on YU Torah, and that's going to be tomorrow's daf, which is Chaf Hey. So the Mirz Hashem B'Yom Rishon, we can begin on daf Chaf Vav. Same time, same place. I'll wish you a very fine Shabbos Chol HaMoed, and Moadim L'Simcha, Chag Sameach, and Mirz Hashem. We'll see each other on Yom Rishon.